computer. Okay, so the recording is now in progress, and welcome Blythe and Joe and anyone who's watching this recording. This is I think it's the fourth meeting of the Jijang Bosal book club, and we are well into our reading and discussion of the Ksitigarbha Sutra. And Elizabeth is here now too. I think there may be one or two other people who will be joining us, but we'll just go ahead and start our discussion now. So we've covered. We're still this time we're still covering up through chapter 8 officially, which we talked some about chapters 5, 6, 7, and 8 last time, and I know that Blythe has already revealed that she has taken quite a lot of notes, which I think means she might have a question or two. So at this point, you know what I know. And Elizabeth, thank you, is burning some incense for us. Do we have questions or comments or things that people want to make sure we talk about this time?
I don't want to.
Is that your cue, Blythe?
I don't want to take too much time, but
yeah.
I was interested because I've been trying to place myself in the realness of anything.
Okay.
So when I have a quote here, is the invisible world is whatever our senses, excuse me, whatever our senses cannot see. And this sutra is making the invisible world more visible, or not more visible. The invisible world teaches us about the invisible world, I guess would be the word that tells us of the invisible world. But then I have the ability to see things just as they are, and in the invisible world, whatever is considered whatever the senses cannot see or sense. Am I understanding that? Could you say a little more about that?
Right. So if we were, so the distinction between the visible and the invisible world only applies to people who are not only not Buddhas yet, but who are not very far along. Okay, so it is a I don't know what I mean by very far along, but it's so the ability to see what appears to us to be it's invisible, which means we can't see it. Right? I mean, that's just what it means, and we can't see it, we can't feel it, we can't hear it, we can't touch it, we can't smell it or taste it. It doesn't appear to our senses, but it doesn't mean that it's not real. And one can use
even back to a faith question again, like I have faith that this invisible world exists, even though none of my senses see it.
Right. So it isn't impossible for us to perceive what is currently invisible to us if we develop the ability to do so. So and there are straightforward examples of this, like with microscopes, you can see things that you can't see without a microscope. With the telescope, you can see things that you can't see without a telescope. There are instruments that that we invent that improve our sight or hearing or whatever, and also we can, just by being more attentive, we see, hear, and become aware of things that were invisible to us when we weren't paying attention. and you can, and it's not just a matter of like going from a state of ignoring everything to, okay, now I'm going to focus and concentrate. Over time you can, um, you know, improve your ability to focus and concentrate. You can improve your perception. If you study music, you hear things that people who don't study music would never hear. um, and if you study a foreign language, then you can, you know, hear things that other people don't hear, because they hear the sounds but they have no idea what it means. And then when you know what it means, so you can improve and expand your ability to see things. um, and so it isn't just a matter of faith. um, you know, if you know someone who speaks German, or if you know someone who has studied music, or if you know someone who has a microscope or whatever, then you have like a secondhand knowledge of that ability. But then, you know, you want to go and find out for yourself. You don't want to rely on other people. So you don't want to rely on faith, but the faith can lead you to, um, in you know, faith, as long as you follow up on it, can be a good thing. Um, but uh,
Maybe faith is that you're willing to explore and try to experience things. You have the faith to do that and not just assume what you say is the deal.
well, and so that's probably the most important part, that you don't want to, like, I would say arrogantly, and I'm not saying you or anybody else is being arrogant, but some people are. Some people arrogantly assume that, well, if it can't be perceived by the senses, then it isn't real. It doesn't exist. And if I can't measure it with my instruments, then it doesn't exist. Um, and so that's saying that, that's taking a limited worldview in your own mind and saying reality must conform to my limited worldview, and anything that doesn't isn't real. Um, and that's that, and then you're done. I mean that's, you know, then your world is closed off. Um, and you know, that doesn't mean you believe anything. I mean, you know, it doesn't mean that you know, believe that, uh, I don't know, whatever. You still, I mean, you still have to have reason to believe whatever you believe, and you still have to, if you know, like, if you believe in something and you think it's important, um, if it's not important, then you don't have to believe or not believe in it. But if you believe in something, or you have faith in something and you think it's important, then you need to, um, not just, you know, have faith in it. You need to pursue it. And if somebody tells you, well, you can't understand, you just have to believe it, then I would say avoid people like that. Or, you know, belief systems like that. Anyway, I'm sorry, that's probably too much, but it's a good question. Microsoft search. Anyone knows
Well, I
that?
guess partly one of the things I'm wondering, because they spent so much time on the hell realms and the devils,
Uh-huh. Hmm.
um, the devil kings I wrote are there to cause great suffering or joy, question mark. I kind of thought about that line, on Sunday
Hmm.
when we said suffering is our greatest teacher.
Hmm. Yep. Uh-huh. Yeah.
I mean, is that, I'm still trying to get the devils and the devil kings
Hmm.
and all that, because
Right.
I'm not a person who's, and not because I can't see them.
Yeah. Right. So we'll talk more about that. Yeah. I mean, that's, I feel like we haven't really, that in chapters, 7 and 8, especially in chapter 8, there's a lot. The ghost kings, or so some translations call them the devil kings. The translation that I prefer calls them the ghost kings, and the character that is being translated by some people as devil is really the character for ghost. Which, you know, so is a ghost. So ghosts are not devils. Um, they're spirits, and it's good to, and it's reasonable to wonder whether they're good spirits or bad spirits. You know, because there are both. But we'll get to that. Yeah. I would say that it's just I would say that as we'll see as we go into it, they all work for Jizo, um, and so ultimately they all work for Jizo, and they all have um, the aspiration to help all sentient beings.
And then I put, I like your phrase, don't get unhinged, because I think I've kind of been unhinging.
Okay.
And it's kind of like this thing of, now, wait a minute, this isn't fitting with what I had thought, I believe. Like, one also, but I put a big question mark by, is that if you're, I didn't remember if you said it or it was in a teaching somewhere, but it's necessary if you're a Buddhist to believe in karma and rebirth. Am I unhinging?
Well, so it isn't necessary.
Okay, I put necessary.
Well, so some people will go so far as to say that it's necessary.
Okay.
Um, I wouldn't say that, but I would say that traditionally, all Buddhist teachers have not just believed it, but have taught karma and rebirth. And that includes all Zen teachers, throughout the entire history of Buddhism and Zen. Um, uh, it Nothing is ever required. The Buddha himself said that you have to, understand things for yourself and should not just accept things on faith or whatever. Um, you can accept things on faith if you have reason to believe that someone genuinely knows more than you do, or is a reliable whatever. Uh, you can provisionally believe what they're saying, but you should still be seeking to find out for yourself. Um,
This
you should
might
never
be
be.
like an example of a teacher. If you
Yeah, sure,
believe a
sure.
teacher
Yeah,
can guide that, but you still have to, you don't just get
right.
it from the
And
teacher.
and if you don't think a teacher knows more than you do, what's the point? Um, you should definitely try to find a teacher that you think knows more than you do. If you want to learn math, you need to find a math teacher who knows more math than you do. If you want to learn French, you got to find someone who knows more French than you do. I mean, it's just, you know. So but whatever it is that they know that you don't know, there's a certain amount of faith there. Maybe they're and some people do that. Some people, you know, you shouldn't be able to get too far with that, but some people do, try to pull off basically a con job of saying they know something and getting people to believe them or pay them. But eventually they get found out, I would think.
And I guess to end that, I don't want to
Uh-huh.
dominate here, so I'll just end with one of the things I thought about, uh, was I do have this sense that something transforms and carries on when you die.
Hmm.
But the idea of coming back as an animal or a person or a whatever, maybe not so much as
Hmm.
morphing into something else. I might be a bunch of cells or microbes, or I might
Sure.
be. Uh, does most rebirth karma stuff talk about coming back in a life of a sentient being like a person?
Yes. Well, in Buddhism, yes.
Okay.
And so once again, you don't have to believe that to be a Buddhist, but
Okay.
all schools of Buddhism, all teachers of Buddhism have always taught that. They don't throw people out. They don't, make you stand up and say, I believe in this and that and whatever. And anybody who won't say the credo gets thrown out or whatever. So it isn't, it isn't that you are required to believe it. But that is what the Buddha taught and what all, and Buddhism has always taught, regardless of school or, yeah, go ahead, Joe. Joe has a question now.
Just a question for both you and Blythe.
Mhm. And Elizabeth too. Let's include Elizabeth.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Do we think though that that is something that our Western mindset coming out of Protestant
Mhm.
Christianity, Judaism, that does not have any type of reincarnation and any type of close to karma would be your sinful ways, and you will pay for it.
Mhm.
Uh, and that's why as Buddhism and Zen Buddhism in the U.S. and in the West, I'm sorry, in the U.S. and Europe we have those distractors that are, oh no, 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 that's not a part of this. When in actuality, from what you've said, yes, it is. And people want to cling to the fact more so than, oh no, we don't teach that. We don't hold any of that. That's almost like non-subject.
Well, and so one thing I think is important to know is that reincarnation is not completely foreign or unknown in Western culture. If you do a survey of people throughout, Europe, and basically, if you do a survey of people in countries that are predominantly Christian, which sometimes we're euphemistically call the West. Back in the old days, several decades ago, they would just refer to it as Christendom, right? But if you go through and you give people a survey and ask them for their beliefs about the afterlife, of course, some people have no belief in afterlife. Some people believe in heaven and hell. Some people say, "Oh, I don't know," whatever. Um, and consistently at least 15, but usually more like 25%, and in many cases half or more of the people that are asked in different countries will say they believe in reincarnation. Belief in reincarnation is very widespread in Western culture, and in some countries it's over half of people will say they believe in reincarnation. Belief in astrology is extremely widespread. Belief in people believe in all kinds of things. People have all kinds of weird ideas, and also it's historically been part of our, like um, Plato, Socrates, and other ancient Greek philosophers believed in reincarnation, and reincarnation was actually very prominent part of Greek and Roman culture. Of course, not everybody there believed in it. Um, just like not everybody who lives in a predominantly Christian country believes in the Christian heaven and hell. Um, but sometimes there's an assumption that like reincarnation is an Asian foreign belief and Westerners have no, you know, relationship with it. It's just not true. A lot of people just and there are people. There's actually an interesting paper that's used to be available in PDF form, where people have actually studied why is it that people in the West believe in reincarnation, and some of them believe about it because they read about it in books. Some people believe in it because they have been exposed to like Buddhism or Hinduism or whatever. Some, but some people just kind of spontaneously. I mean, if you're just thinking of, if you just have the freedom to speculate, what happens when we die? People will come up with that. We come back.
Well, you know what I would say too, that
Uh-huh.
which is based on the idea of science, or
Mhm.
like you say, wanting the microscope to prove it, then I see
Uh-huh.
something I couldn't see otherwise. I've watched some documentaries that they've done on what happens after people die and people's personal experiences.
Mhm.
And this is like a PhD doctor at Duke. Do you know the name of the thing I'm talking about? There's a study at Duke that's gone on for years.
Yeah, Duke
Anyway,
Duke has a big department of parapsychology, so there's
yeah,
a lot of that kind of stuff going
and
on
it's
down
it
there.
was really interesting.
Uh-huh.
But
Yeah.
this was the stories in this particular documentary were about kids who spontaneously tell
Mhm.
very detailed stories
Mhm.
about the lives that they remembered, and the parents start freaking out that the kid's going crazy. And anyway, they are in the scientific, if you want to say, way,
Mhm.
trying to take out any possible by accident they could have thought this or that, but the level of details and experience, and then usually at pre-puberty, it's anywhere from like 8 to 10 or 12, it begins to fade.
Mhm.
And so when they've done most of these studies that I saw in the documentary, it was little kids. The kid was like maybe 4, 5 years old, telling all about his other life and naming places and taking them places and showing them and telling them what had happened. And so it was just interesting that the people who believe in science are actually trying to frame science around that and finding things that are working like a microscope might.
Yeah,
So
right.
that's the
I,
Western approach, maybe more.
yeah, I'm, was it last time? Was it in this group or whatever? I talked about interview with, oh, now I can't remember the author's name, but he said, and I tend to agree with him on this. He said that people who try to do things like that should be boiled in oil. Um,
You mean the studies who try to
yeah,
do the
yeah.
studies?
Uh, people who are doing that, then, and they are scientists and they are doing, serious research. They are attacked and ridiculed by other scientists who don't believe in what they're doing. And I doubt seriously that it will ever uh, prove anything to anyone who doesn't already believe one way or another. I don't think it'll come to that. Whereas you can, uh, science, we think of as hard science. You can uh, you can prove things to people. You know, people who don't want to believe in something it can be demonstrated to them. And I doubt that it will ever reach that level with this kind of studies that you're talking about. There's a lot of inference, and you can and people who don't want to believe that, and these cases are very, 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 very unusual. Um, and therefore, who knows what they really mean. Um, uh, even if they prove a case of reincarnation, or seem to prove a case of reincarnation, it's very, 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 very few people have these kinds of past life memories with any kind of, but however, a lot of people have all kinds of claimed past life memories, that are not, you know scientifically um, provable or whatever. But the people who do have anything like what you're talking about, Blythe, are very exceptional. And so, what does that mean for the rest of us? Maybe nothing. Um, I just say that's not where I look to for.
Put your energy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But a lot of people do. A lot of people think that's very interesting, and I used to think that was cool. Um, I thought I first started doing meditation because the what's his name, Mahesh Yogi, you know, who had a PhD in physics and claimed it was all very scientific and stuff. That helped convince me to first start doing meditation, because I thought it sounded very, cool that it was both, mystical and scientific at the same time.
Would
But
you
I don't,
say
yeah.
reincarnation, in your understanding,
Mhm.
what you come back as, whatever experience you're having, is the result of cause and effect? Is the point of the, not point, but the reincarnation develops from the things you did in this life that you're supposed to benefit from learning? Or
Mhm. So
is that how
that's
you?
So that's definitely part of it. But when you add in the kind of things that you find in chapters, not just in chapters 7 and 8, but especially in these two chapters in the Ksitigarbha Sutra, these are all about things that can be done to influence how your karma works out. It's not deterministic. And that's why that's why in Buddhism you have this middle period. It's not like you die and then instantly you're just reborn in whatever it is state that corresponds to your balance sheet of bad and good stuff. You go through this middle existence where you are the way that it's kind of referred to in the sutra, you're tried and examined, and you have to defend yourself. And but at the same time, all during that time, you can pray, and your loved ones who are left behind, they can pray, and they can influence what happens. Basically, they can pay for a really good lawyer, or they can bribe the judge, or however you want to look at it. They can influence it's not, it's not just a calculation, just add up what you've done, good stuff in one column, bad stuff in the other column, and that just automatically determines the outcome. And that's stated over and over again in these two chapters in the sutra. Ksitigarbha and the ghost kings, or the deep devil kings, or whatever you want to call them. They say, even if you have done bad things, we can get you off, basically. If you and your loved ones, perform the right actions. And they also say, if when you die, if your loved ones, like, go out and perform animal sacrifices and kill animals, and do bad things, thinking that that will help you, it can actually hurt you. Just as doing bad things in your own life will, have a negative influence in the next life. Yeah, so it's the main thing is that it's not deterministic. We can, at any, just like in any moment of our lives, our current state is the result of past karma. But we always have a choice. We can always have the choice of how we respond to what is happening to us right now.
Plus, I have a
That,
thought.
yeah, sure, Joe.
Just that if we look at the word reincarnation
Uh-huh.
and we break down that word, it
Uh-huh.
really is to go back into the flesh.
That's right. That's right.
So
And
if
see what? I'm sorry, I missed it.
it means that reincarnation, if you break down the word, would mean more or less you return into the flesh,
Oh, okay.
right? But consider people who reincarnate, and if they've been especially good, and they're climbing that ladder higher and higher, they come back as a deva or something, right?
Yes. Or
And we
or in a
flesh,
pure land.
right?
Yeah. And also, so sometimes people get hung up on the difference between reincarnation and rebirth. And actually, a lot of people, for some reason, insist that, oh, reincarnation is not Buddhist, but rebirth is. But of course, the Buddha didn't speak English, so he didn't distinguish between reincarnation and rebirth. He didn't know either. He didn't use either one of those words, and they both mean basically the same thing: to come back into a body, some body. And so, even if you get reborn in a heavenly realm, or in a pure land, it's still considered to be, a body that you're getting, some kind of body.
But that's
So invisible to us.
right, right. So we can't
Yeah.
state that yes, it's a blood and water and electric body,
Mhm.
because we don't see it.
Yeah.
Do we have a sense of a family or other people who've been part of our life, or are we the lone star doing whatever our thing is in the afterlife
Oh, well,
relationship?
let me see if I can find it. But could you say that again, Blythe?
In the afterlife, whether it's in the other life we are, or even when we're in one of the hells or whatever, do we have a sense of the people we particularly were close to or loved
Hmm.
in this life, in that life, in the in between when we're
Hmm.
forming? Or do we totally feel this alone?
Um, well, so let me just show you something from the sutra.
Because you
It
hear
doesn't.
so much about the way
Mhm.
you would respect your ancestors and
Uh-huh.
pray for them and stuff, do you have a sense of being with them?
Well, so at least according to the, oh, here it is. Yeah, let's see. From current slide, and yeah, at least according to the Sutra, it says that throughout the 7 day period, which is the 49-day period between death and rebirth, down here.
Yeah.
Oops, see, I screwed that up. Let's see. Do that. Yeah, try it again. Oh, oh. I apologize. Okay. Yeah, so during this period, down here, the person hopes that his parents, children, and relatives will engender the strength of merit to rescue him, or her. And that is,
Mm.
I think this is Ksitigarbha speaking. It could be. I think it's Ksitigarbha speaking. I didn't put that in there. But so, yeah, I think that. I mean, I certainly don't know. I mean, I know what the sutra says, but as to what that is actually like, um, I don't know. I mean, people have a very strong sense of their, people who are still alive have a very strong sense of their loved ones who have died, so I think the connection, remains very strong. Personally, that's my personal
And the importance that they put on praying for the dead, your parents or your family or whoever,
Mhm.
like the Oban ceremonies and all those things. That
Yeah,
would be
right.
part of what.
Yeah, and the Oban ceremony goes on. It doesn't stop after 49 days. It doesn't stop after even 2 or 3 years, which is usually the longest period of time that is considered to be, between death and subsequent rebirth. And I think the connection is still there. Um, so the Oban ceremony kind of pictures one's ancestors as being, you know, somewhere, in the next life, and that they actually can come and return and be with you during that period of time, during the Oban month. And but if you're, how does that jive with the idea that they've already been reincarnated somewhere else? Well, I think, I mean, I think the connection still, my personal belief is that the connection still remains, um, and that uh, I think once the person has been reborn, unless they're one of these extraordinary people who have very clear memories of their past life, once you're reborn, you can still feel the effects of people praying for you. You don't know what it is. You don't know where it's coming from.
Mm.
You wouldn't have any clear idea of where it's coming from.
Mm.
But I think you can still feel. I definitely think you can still feel the beneficial effects of people praying for you. Joe.
Just an interesting note, there are very similar correlations in Catholicism of having masses said for your deceased,
The,
whether it's right after
right.
they've departed or, I mean, maybe every year on the
Sure.
anniversary of
Right.
death.
Right. And so even though Catholicism doesn't have, although there are Catholics who believe in reincarnation, there's actually there's always been a minority of Christians who believe in reincarnation. And there's actually always been a very, in Jewish mysticism, there's actually a tradition of belief in reincarnation. Um, not that I know anything about Jewish mysticism or Christian mysticism for that matter, but I read these things on the internet and I try to check up. I think that they're true. So anyway,
Right.
but but yeah, even though Catholicism doesn't have reincarnation, Catholicism has purgatory. Um, so that's one thing. So that's one good reason to keep doing masses for your dead loved ones year after year after year, to help ensure that if they are in purgatory, to help them along. You know, that it's just, like in Buddhism, it's not deterministic. Others can do things for you. You know.
And also too, in Hispanic culture, if we consider the Day of the Dead, I mean,
Hmm.
basically all of these concepts are saying that we as entities are still out there
Yeah.
after we leave out of our physical bodies, and we're
Uh-huh.
still we're I guess we're in the invisible world at that point, and
Right.
and we and if they really know us, they probably know, well, oh, hey, we need help to
Sure.
to move forward in a better positive light. Um, so, I would think also too with Hispanic cultures, Catholicism's involved with that, but also probably just indigenous religions as well all feed into those types of holidays, especially on
Yeah.
what, November 1st, November 2nd, Day of the Dead. Um, but and maybe that's just a very basic human
Yeah.
condition, that because we can't explain death, we create these situations. We create scaffolding around it to help us cope. We don't know because it is on the other side.
Yeah. So the invisible world used to be not necessarily more visible, but was much more real and accepted and um, felt, by everybody, prior to fairly recent times, culturally. Um, and a lot of people are still living in that world. So people who live in cultures that are um, I don't know, not as quite as modernized as maybe most of us are. They have that you could see it as an advantage, although some people see it as a terrible disadvantage. People still believe in superstition, um, superstitious nonsense that their parents and whatever believe in. But um, we are getting a little far afield, and we probably should take a break at this point. Um, let's take a 5 minute break
Okay.
and then come back and talk. Let me go through a few slides and talk more about the sutra itself, and then um, so that we talk more about especially chapters 7 and 8 of the sutra. Okay, 5 minute break.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. De nada. Hey, Joe.
Hey,
Hi, Elizabeth. Give Blythe another few seconds. Are you there, Blythe? Can you hear us? Right, so I know we talked about chapters 7 and 8 some last time. I'm going to go over them a little bit more now. And uh, hello, Joe's dog. I can't remember the name of your dog, Joe. What's your name of your dog?
Andre.
Andre. Hello, Andre. Okay.
Um,
No, it's not necessary. I like Andre. So these are just some quotes that I thought were interesting from chapter 7. Let's see. This one kind of focuses on uh, the fact that you can help people who would otherwise experience very bad things uh, in their next life. Um, this one says that you can also, if you perform the wrong actions after someone has died, that you can make the things worse for them.
bro.
Uh, but I don't think too many of us have to worry about people doing animal sacrifices for us. I think that's one of the main things. Although, yeah, I interpret this mostly in terms of like discouraging people from engaging in harmful actions, in particular animal sacrifice, on behalf of someone who has died. Um, and and this one is a quote that I had thought it was relevant to the question that Blythe brought up, um, of what the person who's going through the middle existence during the 49-day period. Um, so the 49-day period itself is usually considered to be unpleasant. And so one of the things that I don't know if we'll get to talking about it, but I think it's actually on the very last slide that I have, um, is that you can actually be removed from this interim period at any time and sent on to a favorable rebirth, if your friends and relatives and are chanting hard enough, and Jijang Bosal comes and just, or one of his helpers, they can just come and pluck you up and send you off to, you don't, because the 49-day period itself is usually considered to be uh, not fun. Let's see what's going on. Okay, so in chapters 7, starts off with Ksitigarbha kind of, I say, opining on the sorry state of things for beings in Jambudvipa, which is where we are. Um, and he talks about how we're mostly trapped in our delusional, self-centered thinking. And even when we do manage to generate virtuous thoughts, it doesn't last very long, and we relapse back to our old harmful patterns of behavior. Um, and then also, if we encounter any difficulty in our lives, we usually just make it worse, um, with our because of our delusional habitual thinking. um, but actually chapter 7 is trying to emphasize, this keeps getting pointed out, this kind of the problem with us sentient beings in Jambudvipa. This is there's a lot of insistence on this, a lot of repetitiveness, but at the same time, the situation isn't hopeless. So there's a balance that's being struck, where the Buddha and Ksitigarbha and the other speakers in the sutra are trying to say that there's a way out, that there's things you can do, um, always at the same time emphasizing that we really do need to do these things because otherwise our situation is very bad. One of the little stories that pops up in chapter 7 is the one, and I think this was mentioned last time, person who's walking through mud carrying rocks. and then so this person who's walking through mud carrying rocks meets a virtuous friend, and this is actually a theme of chapters 7 and 8. So Kalyana Mitra, actually I have here a picture of Ananda. Whenever we encounter this phrase, virtuous friend, or Kalyana Mitata, or whatever this is in Chinese, we should think of Ananda because this all goes back to Ananda. There's a famous story. Ananda one day had this big realization in his meditation. And he came to the Buddha and he said, Buddha, I just figured something out, I think. And the Buddha said, oh, well, what is it, Ananda? And Ananda said, I think that half of this whole, thing that we're trying to do, half this whole path that we're trying to do, really, well, excuse me, really boils down to having good friends and helping each other. And the Buddha said, Ananda, that's not right. That's not right at all. It's not half. It's the whole path. That is the whole path. Having good friends, and helping each other through our spiritual friendship is the whole of the path. And so, anytime we encounter this phrase, virtuous friend, is how it's usually translated in English, Kalyana Mitata, they're referring back to that famous story, little conversation between the Buddha and Ananda. And so anyway, so if you are walking through mud, carrying rocks, someone comes along, a good friend, a virtuous friend, and they can help to carry the rocks. They can help to steady you so that you don't, it's bad enough to be, carrying a burden walking through mud. It's much worse if you fall down face first into the mud. So your friend can help to carry some of the rocks. Your friend can help to steady you so that you don't fall down. And they can show you the way out of the mud, even better. And then when you reach the firm ground, your virtuous friend will then admonish you. See that mud over there that you just got out of? Don't go back into it. And then right after that it says, living beings who are accustomed to evil begin with a minute amount of evil and then quickly escalate into measureless wrongdoing. Because these beings have such a habit, when they are about to depart this life, their parents and relatives should make merit in their behalf to assist them on the road ahead. And so, right. And so this is Ksitigarbha who's speaking now in the chapter. He continues to describe various practices that can benefit these dying beings. So now he's talking about people who aren't dead yet, but they're dying. And in particular, the recitation of the names of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Okay, so this is things that you can do for someone else who is dying. Recite the names of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in such a way that they will hear them. And then there isn't a lot of emphasis on this period just before dying. It's kind of mentioned here, and then Ksitigarbha goes into talking about the 49-day period, and now he's talking about the practices that should be performed by the friends and loved ones for the person who has died during these 49 days. Sacrifice again. So just, that's a take-home lesson here, I guess. And also performing. If you are doing chanting or whatever it is you're doing, praying, making offerings for someone who has died during that time period, you should also be conducting yourself, in a way that is virtuous. And so any wrongdoing that you engage in, works against what you're trying to accomplish in your chanting or praying or making offerings. Performing any kind of wrongdoing at this time would be like someone who, this is another little story. It's like, it's as if someone was traveling for very far and had gone without food for days. It was carrying a very heavy load. And then they come upon someone, and all that person does is just put another rock in their bag that they're carrying. You don't want to be that person who does that. So you want to conduct yourself properly during the period, during the 49-day period. All of this is reiterated and expanded upon in reply to a question. So this a new character kind of shows up in this chapter, the elder great eloquence. Any being who hears the name of a Buddha or Bodhisattva when they are nearing death will gain release regardless of their past offenses. And so this again emphasizes it's not automatic. And so and this is one of the places where Ksitigarbha, he says this, he says, if you hear the name of a Buddha or a Bodhisattva while you're nearing death, you will gain release. Gaining release means you get out of whatever punishment you were supposed to get, regardless of your past offenses. But Ksitigarbha then says, but you shouldn't count on that happening. What if you don't hear the name of a Buddha or a Bodhisattva at the last minutes before you die? So that means that you should cultivate virtue while you are still healthy and strong, because the great ghost of impermanence. There's different translations of this. The great ghost of impermanence can come to one at any time. This is a very literal translation of this passage. This is not news to anybody. We know this, but I think this is a nice way of putting it.
That's the same as the thief in the night.
It is the thief in the night. Yeah. So I mean, and the great the great ghost of impermanence is generally considered to be a Chinese Buddhist euphemism for death. I mean, that's what the great ghost of impermanence is. You don't know when you're going to die. Okay, then we go to chapter 8. I found some one. You may have heard of this practice of joss paper. Anybody ever heard of joss paper?
Vaguely.
It's money, but it's money that you burn for someone who has died. So it's a special kind of offering, and basically, so like temples will sell joss paper, and one of the ways, one type of joss paper is this Ksitigarbha paper money, also sometimes called hell money. And so basically it's a way it's a ritualized way of making a donation to a temple, but then also going through this ritual act of then you make the donation to buy the paper, and then you burn the paper and dedicate the merit to the loved one who has died. And you can buy these in different. This is if you want some. Even though the website is all in Chinese, the amount that you pay is in dollars. So you can get like $10 worth of joss paper or whatever. And some of them have pictures of Ksitigarbha on them. Some of them say on them Ksitigarbha paper money in English. But I found this while I was looking for pictures of Ting Yama, basically. And so his picture is on some of these joss paper things anyway. I just found that amusing. Sorry for getting off on a tangent there. But
Joss.
What's that? Joss. 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 Or if you do a Google search on hell money, it will there's a Wikipedia entry on hell money that says this is another name for joss paper, and it gives you can buy joss paper that actually looks quite a bit like American currency. Not enough to get you arrested or to be able to pass it off as counterfeit, but it's kind of funny. All right. So
how do you? Excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was wondering this makes me think about how I've read it, especially Japan, some of the things where you have to pay the monks for death rights and for
Yeah.
the whole thing of money and karma, or money and earning some kind of, I kind of get unhinged on that. What, it's like if somebody's really rich and gives a ton of money to the temple, they're going to more likely end up in a good world or help a parent or do whatever it is they want to do because they did the money.
Yeah. Well, so one way of looking at that is that rich people usually have very, very bad karma. And so
Mm.
so they need that help. But at the same time, this is I mean you can I mean I don't know. Yeah. I mean it
I mean, I know
in
money,
most
they have to have a living and they maintain the temples, but
yeah,
just take
yeah,
a donation to do that. Don't trade it off for somebody's prayers or soul.
yeah, right. Yeah.
I don't know. Okay.
Yeah, and it is often just it's often kind of crass and transactional, and it is the case that if so if you are a young, good-looking monk with a very good chanting voice, you can get a lot of donations for doing ceremonies for people. Um, uh, And if you're not young and good looking and don't have a good voice, then you got to find another way of hustling, I guess. If you're, but
I think in Catholicism, it's the same situation that if you have that mass said for your deceased, I believe you are giving a donation in exchange for that mass.
yeah,
Not that the
I believe
self.
that's the case. I don't know. I mean, it's also. I mean, going back, if you see these old Puritan churches in New England historical churches, the the most prominent people in the community were always the ones who had the front pews,
Sure.
and they were also the wealthiest ones. And anyway, I mean
Or
none
private.
of that none of that is in the Ksitigarbha Sutra. The Ksitigarbha Sutra doesn't have uh, you know a, doesn't say you have to pay money to get out of hell. It does say make offerings. It does say burn incense. It does say hang banners and have paintings made and things like that. Those are often very expensive undertakings that most people can afford. Um, but chanting and praying, anyone can do. But anyway, so uh, oh yeah, so chapter 8 starts off. At that time, from within the iron encircling mountains, that's where the hells are, within the iron encircling mountains. King Yama and the measureless ghost kings all arrived at Tristrum's heaven and came to where the Buddha was. There were it goes through all these different names. There's like 108 or more names. Ghost King Evil Poison, Ghost King Many Evils, Ghost King Great Quarrels, Ghost King White Tiger, blah blah blah. And the Buddha told King Yama, who's like the head of this group of ghost kings, living beings of Jambudvipa have, and this is just more of the same. Living beings of the Jambudvipa have obstinate dispositions, difficult to regulate and difficult to tame. This great bodhisattva, um, Ksitigarbha, rescues such beings everywhere throughout hundreds of thousands of kalpas, causing them to attain liberation early. So this is an interesting phrase, early, that is earlier than they would without the help of Ksitigarbha. So this again goes to, and so this kind of addresses one of the things that we were talking about earlier, is that these ghost kings or devil kings, are they good? Are they bad? Are they trying to help us? Is their job to help us or to punish us or what? And we're starting to get into that a little bit, but it also is reiterating the job of Ksitigarbha in particular, which is to help us to attain liberation early. Liberation, so liberation here doesn't really refer to enlightenment. It refers to being liberated from the punishment or the result of our bad karma that we would have experienced otherwise. And for people who undergo the ripened effects of wrongdoing, even those who have fallen into the very low realms, the Bodhisattva uses the power of skillful means to, and this is, I should have looked at other translations to see how this is phrased, to extract their fundamental karmic conditions and lead them to realize the events of their previous lives. So it seems to me that there's two things going on there. One is to, to help alleviate some of their bad karma, but I think more importantly is, one of the problems that people have is that they don't clearly see their karma. They don't clearly see why something is happening as a result of their own karma, and which of course is not necessarily a pleasant thing to see, but Ksitigarbha is helping them to do that, and this helps you to get over, use up, get past. I think is probably the best way of putting it, your karma. And then of course it goes back to the usual complaints about us. Buddha, a lot of the Ksitigarbha Sutra is the Buddha and Ksitigarbha complaining about us. Like this: because the beings of Jambudvipa have heavy habits of forming evil, no sooner have they left the lower realms, they go back in again. This necessitates Ksitigarbha, the Bodhisattva, to work hard throughout many kalpas and guiding them across to liberation. And we're making Ksitigarbha work for it. And here's a really nice picture. I looked for pictures of these ghost kings. This is a nice one I found.
Oh my gosh.
But then there's another story in chapter 8 about a virtuous friend. There's a story about the person who gets lost and mistakenly goes down a path where there are many dangerous creatures. And again, a virtuous friend comes along, and this virtuous friend, this Kalyana Mitata, knows about these dangerous creatures and how to deal with them. And in particular, so it isn't just that the person who's gotten lost doesn't know how to deal with the dangerous creatures. He doesn't even know that they're there. He doesn't know that he's stumbled into a dangerous path. And so the virtuous friend warns the lost person. And so the lost person immediately then turns around, tries to find their way out. But the virtuous friend comes along and helps you to find your way out. And then at the end, of course, warns you to avoid that dangerous path in the future. And then also says, and this wasn't in the previous story, I don't think, tells you to warn others as well. And then Ghost King Evil Poison tells the Buddha that, okay, so this goes more to the question of who are these ghost kings or devil kings or whatever? Are they good or are they bad? And this is where it's kind of explained. Ghost King Evil Poison, who's kind of, he's under Yama, but he's kind of representing all of the ghost kings. When we pass people's homes, cities, villages, manors, or houses, where there are men or women who cultivate wholesome deeds as minute as hair fibers, who but hang a banner or a canopy or present a little incense or a few flowers to make offering and the veneration to the images of Buddhas or Bodhisattvas, or who recite the sacred sutras or burn incense as an offering to even a sentence or a verse. All of us ghost kings have respect and revere such people just as we do for the Buddhas of the past, present, and future. And we, the ghost kings, so there are ghost kings and there must be ghosts, plebeians or whatever, right? We command the smaller ghosts, each of whom also has great power, as well as the earth spirits, to protect them and not allow evil events, untoward happenings, virulent diseases, untoward serious illnesses, as well as unwelcome phenomena to come near these houses and places, much less enter the doors. The Ghost King, and then it switches to another Ghost King. This is now Ghost King presiding over life. And this further talks about what is the role of these ghosts, these spirits, these devils. And Ghost King presiding over life says that he is in charge of both the time of birth and the time of death of sentient beings. And he explains that his vow, I mean, his, his MO, his modus operandi, is to benefit living beings, but they don't realize my intention, and therefore they go through birth and death in distress. Let's see. And then Ghost King prescribed, then proceeds to explain what people should do when someone is about to be born. So this is kind of switching the focus. We've been talking a lot about people who are dying or people who are dead. Now we're talking about birth. And it's pretty much the same. Don't commit animal sacrifice, pray, and avoid unvirtuous actions. And then the Ghost King, presiding over life, also declares his aspiration to help those who are on the verge of death. And now there's more emphasis on, there's a little bit more played out in detail, the dying process and what to do during the dying process. It was referred to earlier in chapter 7, but it's gone into in more with more emphasis and more detail in chapter 8. Those who are nearing the time of death, if they are able to hear a Buddha's name, a Bodhisattva's name, or a sentence or a verse from Mahayana Sutras, then they will be saved from the worst hells. And if they have committed only small misdeeds, they will quickly be released from their lesser punishments. So, this isn't new. This is basically what's been said before. I just put a picture of the one of the 3 volumes of the Avatamsaka Sutra up here, because it says, read a verse or a sentence from a sutra. This is a good. This is a very good translation with the commentary into the Avatamsaka Sutra. Oh, okay. All right. How are we doing on time? Can't see. Oh yeah. So we are very close to being out of time. I do have a slide on Yama and another slide on just kind of a summary slide. This is one thing I won't show the slide, but I just want to mention this, that according to, so in this sutra, and especially in these 2 chapters, there's a focus on birth, when we are, strong and healthy, that is before old age really starts to kick in and we are approaching death, during the time when old age is kicked in and we are approaching death, and when we're dying, and then after we're dead, during the middle period between life and birth, and then it starts over again. So Ksitigarbha is concerning himself with all these stages, and as much emphasis as there is on dying and after you're dead, there is a lot of emphasis on the people who are and both in chapters 7 and 8 there is some attention given to the fact that the people who are doing, if you're chanting or performing ceremonies or making offerings, burning joss paper, whatever, for people who have died, you get benefit from that as well. And actually, there's there's some figures that are giving about what percentage you get and what percentage the people who, but I don't not believe that, but I don't see that as really the important point. I think it is important to realize that you are benefiting from that, just as you benefit from all good deeds that you perform, including ones that you're performing for people who have died. So yeah, it is very close to being out of time. We'll continue talking for a little bit, but so are there questions, comments? Elizabeth hasn't said anything.
Will you show us those slides next time? and talk about them?
Which ones? The ones on,
You had some other slides that you didn't have time to talk about.
yes. Yeah,
Okay.
sure. Yeah, we'll get to it. Is there anything in particular that you want to get to that we haven't gotten to, or that you think I might be on one of those slides? So we will be continuing on. So we can continue. You know, whatever people still want to talk about from these chapters, we can continue to talk about next time. But I want people to move on and read ahead. Chapters 9 through. Let me see if I can find the schedule. I will show that if I can find it. There it is. I'm going to share my screen. March, last month, chapters 1 through 4. April, this month, chapters 5 through 8. May, next month, chapters 9 through 13. 9 through 13. And there's only 13 chapters. So we're going to finish the Sutra next month. And then we will move on to our second book in the Jijang Bosal book club, which is I don't have.
I was going to say, should we be starting on a book besides the Sutra?
Well, so let me stop sharing for a second as I hunt around. I do have that book. I do have a. Well, I don't have to find the slide. I can just. Oh, let me share my screen again. So if you do a Google search on Richard Gombrich, Boiled in Oil, the second hit will be an interview with Richard Gombrich where he explains what he thinks should be done to people who try to use science to verify Buddhist teachings.
What's the title of the book?
Oh no, so that's a different book. This is so yeah. Thank you.
Are you boiling somebody in oil again, Kurt?
Yeah, I am. The title of the book is here it is. This is the book. This is the page of the book on the University of Hawaii website. It's possible The Making of a Savior Bodhisattva, Jijang in Medieval Japan, by Jiru. They don't give her full name here. Jiru Ing. NG is her last name. She's a nun, so it's her monastic name, Jiru Ing, I guess. And let me see. I'm just going to see. Is there a PDF? Is there a free PDF of this floating around? PDF. The Making of a Savior Bodhisattva. I don't know. Yeah.
Isn't that the one that's sort of a pricey book? If you get
Well,
paper.
so if you do the Google search that I just did, and I don't know. I mean, I'm not in. I bought the book. Okay. But there is a free PDF version of it available. If you just do a Google search on PDF and then to give the main title of the book, The Making of a Savior Bodhisattva, it will take you to a free PDF version of that. And like I said, I have the book. I think it's it depends upon it's not that pricey, but it's like I forget what the cost is at Amazon. I can look at it.
I think I got mine for like, was it $19 or something?
Yeah, that's not too bad. You might be able to
No,
find like a might be able to find like a used copy at Abbey Books or Amazon sells used books as well. So
right,
um,
mine's used.
Elizabeth.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, you recommended like this version of,
Oh, that's I have that.
okay, but I got this other one, the
Uh-huh.
Sutra of Ksitigarbha Fundamental Vows,
Oh,
and it has
yes,
a lot of commentary in it
yes.
by,
Swan Hua.
yeah. So he says he has a lot of explanation and commentary, and
Yes.
I'm just wondering if what you think about this book. Have you looked
Yeah.
at it?
So yeah, I like his explanation, his commentary. He's very, very and actually I mentioned him previously. I think he's one of the people who said he's even a little too old school for me. Because he's very uh yeah, I mean I think he has a very literal a very kind of I wouldn't say fundamentalist, but kind of very orthodox interpretation of things. Um,
There,
you know,
I just wondering your opinion because he has a lot of commentary and even within the text, like in brackets and
yeah,
stuff. So I was
yeah.
wondering, but he said, for example, about Yama, that
Mhm.
the ghost king Yama was an emanation of Kshitigarbha, actually.
Uh,
He has so much explanation. So I was just wondering if, so
Um,
whether it was worth the,
oh, well, that's all available for free at the City of 10,000 Buddha's website. You can download a PDF of that book. So, I mean, I definitely think it's worth. I, yeah, I mean, yeah, Swanhua is very interesting. I mean, so the good thing about Swanhua is it's unfiltered. He's not trying to, give you a version of Buddhism that Westerners and modern people will find more palatable. He's given it to you, the straight stuff. Um, but it's his version of the straight stuff. And so everything that he says is Yama an emanation of Ksitigarbha? Yeah, I don't know, maybe.
that's
Um,
why I was just wondering whether it was standard or whether it was kind of his take on it. So okay.
well, it's a lot of both. I mean, and he's a big guy. I mean, he is, his opinions are worth knowing and worth studying and shouldn't be discounted just because I don't like them sometimes.
What do you think about Jan Chosen Bay's book? It's
Yeah,
obviously different from
uh-huh,
reading the
yeah,
sutra, but
yeah. I like her book. She has some interesting stuff in it. I think that it's
it's not
I mean,
nearly as teacher oriented like what we're getting in the sutra. It's, to me at least, it wasn't.
yeah, and also it's very much focused on kind of the modern Japanese version of Jizo, uh, and and even then, I think it really doesn't. I think it's kind of Jan Chosen Bay's own, which is very interesting. It's her kind of personal view of Jizo, which is based upon her own understanding of Japanese Buddhism, which she knows a lot about. Um, but it's uh,
Like the 2 pages listing all the different Jizos. She did a lot about the
mhm,
dead
mhm,
babies and abortions,
uh-huh,
but there's like a page or more than a page with
mhm.
names of all these different Jizos. And I got kind of like, what is that about?
Well, so what that's is one of the things that that's about is if you go to Japan and you visit different temples, there's lots of different Jizos, and they have Jizos for this and Jizos for that, and each one has a different like story and stuff behind it, um, and there's similar things, in well, I think there's less of that. I mean, like if you go to a Korean Buddhist temple, they have a statue of Jijang Bosal. It's just Jijang Bosal. Um, and in there are different versions and flavors of. Oh, we lost Joe, but um, Yeah, I think, you know, her book is very much focused on the Japanese version of Jizo, which is the Japanese do everything their own way. They're just like that. Okay, I am going to have to go. So, let's just before we go, let's just recite the 4 vows together. I think is our should be our standard way of closing. Sentient beings are numberless, we vow to save them all. Delusions are endless, we vow to cut through them all. The teachings are infinite, we vow to learn them all. The Buddha way is inconceivable, we vow to attain it. May whatever excellent qualities we have gained from this practice be extended for the benefit of all beings. So, bye, Elizabeth and Blythe and Joe. It's great to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks for
And
coming.
thank you for your patience on my questions when I missed last week.
No, thank you for your questions. Right.
Okay, see you
Bye-bye.
guys next
Good
week.
night.
Good night.